Hello, I'm Barry Brandon, and this is another of the design analysis series, which is kind of morphing into, this is the design I'm working on, these are the design decisions I made, these are the features of whatever design this is. So when it gets done, and in the process, I kind of talk about it on the way up, and sometimes things change. If you have seen, well, you will notice that if you've watched any other episodes of this series, you will notice that, I'm sorry, I'm sitting here, got a button that's coming loose over here on the sweater. I've got my lap, which we'll see in just a minute. You will notice that I had two cardigans in this series. One of those cardigans has now morphed itself into a shawl that I'm working on. So you never know. But let's take a look. What we're going to talk about is this one, which is called, which doesn't really have a name yet. I've got one friend who wants to call it Bacchanalia, which is kind of fun, kind of thing because of all the grapes in it. You see there are grapes in here. I've got another friend who has a vineyard, and she wants to call it, suggested calling it Veraison, and Veraison is a stage in grape development, as I understand it, where there'll be different colors of grapes all in one bunch as they ripen up. So that kind of like that, which is great. Both of those are really great. The only deal is that down here we have olives. So the olives can also be found around grape vineyards, at least in Italy. I think, if I remember correctly, in California as well. So I don't know what to call it, vineyards and such. I don't know what to call it, but it'll be something. But let's take a look at this one closer, okay? Here we are. This is the very bottom, as you can tell. This is, there's a split rib here. This is the two front sections and one back section. Here's the other front section. That's part of a button, which we'll talk about in just a minute. But what I did is I added an extra knit stitch along here, so that there you can pick up along that extra knit stitch in here. There are two of them on the edge here. And then what you end up doing is adding this rib, which is about 3 rounds of flat stockinette, so it rolls like that. And you do that all in one piece, and then knit. It's like you have live stitches from this and live stitches from that, and you knit the two stitches together, the first stitch of this and the first stitch of this together, and you with the red yarn, which is called Deep Garnet, I think, here, and then you start on the way up, and then you get into these little bobbles here. This is you'll notice is a third color per round. So each time you have to weave that in, the beginning of that in, make the bobble and weave out that yarn, all the while carrying the greenish yarn too here. If you'll remember from the very first video, I think this section I didn't particularly like the colors on, so I took it out, picked up stitches along here, did the new colorway here, and then this last round of purple is actually Kitchener stitched this section to that section. So it's just a way, I just didn't like the colors once I got all the way up here. You'll see this, what I call olive section. These are all done as a third color knot as well. These are done, you take one stitch and knit 5 stitches into it, and then if that's the last stitch you take this and put it over that, and over that, and then over that, and then you get back to one stitch, but it has all these other stitches on top of it. It makes this sort of knot here. These are not so hard, these little blops, because you're making them out of the same pattern yarn as you've already done. So those are, I call this Blue 3. This is olives, red olives, I guess. This is knots on a string. You see here your Celtic knots and sort of on a string. This is dancing knots because they're kind of dancing all around that one. Then you get into the big, what do I call this? I think this is grapes or vines? Grapes, maybe, grapes. And this has just arbitrary little colors of this blue kind of thrown in there just to kind of give it a little interest and texture. This is not symmetrical at all. This is fairly symmetrical as far as technically with a cardigan. What you're supposed to do is have the last stitch here and the first stitch there be the same, so that, and there be a mirror image. I did not do that here at all. It's just so busy. It just was hard to kind of make all that happen. But it doesn't bother me because what I decided to do to make that less obvious is when I added on the ribbing, then I also added on another one of these little piping places. Same thing, 3 rounds of the red and in stockinette, and it curls, and you can see that's reverse stockinette there. It curls. And then when you do that, you end up with the back of these stitches here as you knit these together. And in order to hide, there's a steek in here, I picked up in these stitches along here, when you get through, because of all the things you do, there are 3 red lines of stitches. The middle stitch I picked up, the middle line I picked up stitch for stitch, and did a little bit of a flange, a facing here, knitted it this way, cast it off, stuffed that steek because it's right in there, and then whipped it down so that it's all kind of covered up, which is kind of a nice way to cover all that up. Kind of I think somebody called it a sandwich. That's kind of the same thing, but not really. But that's what this does. Then you come up here, and this knots on a string is about 5 rounds smaller than the one down further. And this, these olives are a little bit smaller than these. They're also going in different directions. So you have all those charts. And then you get up here, and it's about time for the grapevine again, and I've reduced that. What I ended up doing was taking this section of the grapevine and putting it together so that it comes over your shoulder, because here's the 3 needle bind off. You can kind of see it in there, the 3 needle bind off for the shoulder seam. Same thing when I put on the ribbing around the neck. I picked up stitches along here and knitted those together with another one of these piping things here. And then when this piping meets that piping, I just took a needle and tapestry needle and just sewed those together, so it kind of turned the corner. I did the same down here at the bottom, so it turned the corner, and that's basically just kind of whipping the ends of this. I think I called that the piping, the vertical piping and the horizontal piping. I whipped the 2 together. The part of this is that this piping curls that way and this piping curls that way, so you've got to butt together like that, but it works out. You got to get that together. The sleeves are done by picking up. They're picked up. Let's see if I can see the inside better. You pick up, and you can see here, I didn't do the flange. I just got tired of doing it because you weren't going to see it, and did my standard crisscross up over the cut steek flap, which is, but you pick up stitches at where the steek meets the body. You pick up stitches right in there and work this way down to the wrist. The wrist is also split like the bottom ribbing is, and then there's this piping that went on that way. And what happens is the piping gets attached to the body, and then you work the ribbing to the end. What you do on this split ribbing is that you have to have an odd number of stitches, because you start off with knit 1, purl 1 here, which is an even number of stitches, and when you get all the way to the end, you'll end up in a purl 1, so you add 1 more stitch for making an odd number of stitches to have these go together. Now, why that doesn't go together? Interesting. Anyway, that's how that works. And then these stitches, these sleeves are knitted from the shoulder down, and you have a central stitch here of the background. You can see it there. That's the background yarn, is a single stitch, and you do your decreases on either side of that central stitch. Okay, and then I think that's about it, except for the buttonholes in the sleeves. Let's take a look at that. These are done. I think I just did a yarn over. I'll have to double check my notes. I think I just did a yarn over, or I only cast off one stitch. I'll have to double. It's two stitches. That's what I did. I cast off 2 stitches and then added the 2 stitches back on, all the way up, evenly spaced up the front. And then for the buttons, I really wanted buttons that I didn't want to have manufactured buttons. I wanted to try my best at knitted buttons. So these are knitted buttons made out of, let's see, they're just sewn on there, made out of this color yarn. And they have a button. There's a button, I don't know whether you can see it, but there's a button of that kind of color. I don't know whether you can see it in there. Kind of, sort of. You can see it. It's right there. You can kind of see it there, inside there. And so once you get it to a certain spot, you put that button in and then draw it up. And you have these long tails. And I will sew these on. But, and there are 11 of them. So I had to make 11 buttons. One of them, I was talking and I just said, isn't this wonderful? And I pulled it and it came, some of these have knots on the back. Some of them obviously do not, because I just pulled one off, and rather than lose it, I just tied it on here. So that's why what I was playing with earlier is that I was trying to figure that out. But anyway, I have worn it once without the buttons. Then I had to come back and make the buttons. So that's it. I don't know what I'm going to call it. You will recognize it because you've seen it enough times. But that is this cardigan. All right, so there you have it. A look at whatever this one's going to be called, and all the little ins and outs of it. I'm working on this pattern. I think I may have mentioned. Anyway, I'm working on this pattern right now. It has lots of charts. So, and I'm trying to make it, and it may look daunting at first in the pattern itself, if you get the pattern. The trick is that I'm sure there'll be a kit available for this, just to get all these colors kind of exactly right. But also, the trick is that I didn't want the patterns to be so small just to fit them on more on the page. So you'll probably have a lot of white space, but the charts hopefully will be bigger. I'll try to add extra pictures in the pattern as well, so when I get there. But I'm working on getting the charts onto the pattern right now. So anyway, thank you so much for joining me on this. This has been a journey and I love it. And so I'll keep working on it. I've got some other things in the works that I'll talk to you about when they get here. So in the meantime, thank you so much. I hope to see you again soon. Bye-bye.